Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity to lay out House Joint Resolution 98, which has nothing to do with money. In the movie With Honors, Joe Pesci plays a bum. I bet you didn't expect me to start with that. Someone a Harvard professor would write off as without wisdom. Yet in a pivotal scene in the movie, Joe's character finds himself observing a Harvard class where the professor tries to challenge the wisdom of the Constitution. In response, Joe retorts, "You asked some questions, sir. Now let me answer. The beauty of the Constitution is that it can always be changed. The beauty of the Constitution is that it makes no set law other than faith in the wisdom of ordinary people to govern themselves. The professor rebuts faith in the wisdom of the people is exactly what makes the Constitution incomplete and crude. Joe replies, crude? No, sir. Our founding parents were great men because they knew one thing that all great men should know, that they didn't know everything. Sure, they'd make mistakes, but they made sure to leave a way to correct them. Our founding fathers indeed were great men, but they were not perfect. They did not or could not reasonably foresee the modern federal government we have today with entrenched interest, fiscal mismanagement, and extension of authority, relying on constitutional provisions and abusing those constitutional provisions that they couldn't have dreamed of in 1787. Fortunately, our founding fathers gave us a way to rein in that federal government, to course correct in Article 5 of the Constitution. The first and more traditional way entrusts the people's representatives in Congress to rein themselves in by proposing constitutional amendments with a two-thirds vote of each chamber that are then ratified by three-fourths of the states. Now, we've seen that happen more than 27 times, right? We know that process. We know that we don't have a runaway convention in Congress, right? They propose it. But what if the problem is Congress itself? Did the founding fathers leave us helpless if Congress itself is the problem? No. They left another way for the people to course correct their federal government. Article 5 allows two-thirds of the states to petition for an Article 5 Convention of States to propose amendments to the Constitution. These amendments must then be ratified by the same threshold as amendments proposed by Congress, three-quarters of the states. In 2017, Chairman Darby helped lead us in passing SJR 2 to join several states in proposing an Article 5 convention to rein in the federal government in three ways. Fiscal restraints, think balanced budget, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, limiting the terms of office of federal officials and members of Congress, term limits. At the same time, Texas also adopted legislation to govern the selection and recall of delegates to such a convention. And most importantly for today, Texas also adopted a separate resolution, SGR 38, that puts an 8-year sunset clause on that petition that you all adopted. That means unless this legislature acts, Texas's request for an Article 5 Convention of States to rein in the federal government will expire in early May 2025. I have filed HJR 98 simply to ensure Texas's petition remains pending. It takes time to get 34 states to call for an Article 5 convention. Texas was the 11th state. Since then, we got 19 and more on the way. A large bipartisan majority of the House and Senate believed reining in the federal government was a good idea in 2017. It's a good idea still today. We need Texas to remain in the fight, not retreat. Vast majorities of Texans support reining in the federal government. More than 80% support congressional term limits and a balanced budget amendment, and those are but the tip of the iceberg. I suspect someone may try to oppose this amendment today, claiming there could be a runaway convention. That is nonsense. First, in order to call an Article 5 convention, you have to have 34 states agree to the topics. It is exceedingly difficult to call the convention. That's why we're here today. Second, once called, each state controls who it sends as delegates to the convention, what instructions they abide by, and each state can recall or even criminally penalize delegates who go rogue. Third, once in convention, any proposed amendment outside the scope of the convention will be subject to a point of order. Fourth, any amendment to that's proposed has to be supported by a majority of the delegates. But let's say all of that fails and you somehow get a crazy amendment proposed out of this convention. Even assuming that happens, you still have to have the same threshold, adopt the amendment as if it was proposed by Congress. Three-quarters of the states, 38 states. Can you imagine 38 states ratifying an awful amendment to the United States Constitution? It's hard enough to get 34 to agree to do the convention. I can't imagine getting 38 to agree to do something crazy. I'll leave you with a couple of quotes. Alexander Hamilton, founding father, delegate to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, rightfully noted in Federalist 85, by the fifth article, we may safely rely on the disposition of who? The state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. And George Washington noted, if in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way in which the Congress designates, or Constitution designates. The federal government has grown too powerful. Congress is out of touch and unable to limit itself, either in duration, scope of power, or fiscal responsibility. Our national debt has exploded, and we are all feeling the effects of inflation. Why do you think we had to have the gold bill that we talked about for the last hour? Because of inflation with the federal government. These are not purely for partisan reasons, but rather a creature of the lack of limitations imposed on Congress in the Constitution. The founding fathers could not foresee this, but they did know that we would have a way to correct it with an Article 5 Convention of States. I urge you to pass H.R. 98 with haste to ensure Texas remains in the fight to rein in the federal government. I'm happy to answer any questions from Missouri.